So Sony has just announced the FX3, which is their new cinema camera under the cinema line, underneath this FX6, FX9, and the Sony Venice. And for about $700 more, is this worth it over the A7S III? Let's check this thing out. So Sony has the new FX3, which is their newest camera in the cinema range. Now it does sport a 12 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor. It's capable of shooting up to 120 frames per second in 4K at 280 megabits per second, has your dual SD card slots, and also the CF Express Type A card slots. It has an inbuilt headphone jack and a 3.5mm audio jack. It has a full-size HDMI port, USB-C charging, a fully functional touch flip screen, just like the A7S III. And the key features of this thing, it has s-cinetone profile. Now that is pretty much one of the biggest things with this. And the cinema range has the s-cinetone profile. Also the A1 has it as well. And probably the biggest thing is the inbuilt fan. Now yes, it does have an inbuilt fan, so it's active cooling, and it's great. Now it does come with this handle as well. Now this handle has two professional XLR inputs and a 3.5mm audio jack that connects directly into the hot shoe, and you can get crisp quality XLR audio. Now clearly the body is different to the A7S III. Now I was in a conference with Sony and they did mention that it pretty much is an A7S III, just in a different body and a couple of different specs. Now the image quality and performance will be exactly the same as the A7S III, except for s-cinetone profile. That's the only difference when it comes to image quality, because it's a different picture profile, but you can kind of get that look when it comes to color grading anyway. So essentially this camera is a rehoused A7S III with a few key features that professionals would actually love to utilize. So what are the key differences between this and the A7S III? Well, firstly, let's start with the new design of the body. Now, one of the biggest things between this and the A7S III is that this does not have an EVF. Now, cinema cameras don't really have EVFs. It's pretty much standard when it comes to cinema cameras. They usually put an eyepiece over the top of the LCD screen, and essentially that is your makeshift EVF. That is standard when it comes to cinema cameras. So you're not really losing out if you expect to buy a cinema camera and you want to get this. So it's pretty much the same. And obviously you can see it's a very sort of boxy square design. It's kind of like your regular Alpha series. Actually, it's very similar to A7C, but I guess a bigger, fatter, meaner version on steroids. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now you can see there are 5/4-inch screw mounts on the body, and the buttons are obviously in different positions to the standard Alpha series cameras. Now, I guess the purpose of the 2/4 screws at the top is that you can screw the XLR input at the top and then put it directly like that. So this is one of the key things, is that obviously you're not going to have too much strain on the hot shoe. You're going to put all the weight directly into the screw mount, which is going to make this thing a ton stronger, especially if you do have a very heavy lens or a heavy setup. Now the camera strap clips are actually built into the body of this on either side, which I guess majority of the people buying this probably won't actually utilize this because they're filmmakers, and they're only going to be using this for maybe a safety clip or something when you're mounting it to a rig, just some second point of safety in case the camera falls off. I don't know. It's still a good feature to have anyway, built in, and you're not going to have these little triangular things on the side just getting in the way anyway. I did actually take mine off the A7S III because I wasn't using it, it was just getting in the way. Now there are 6 customizable buttons, which is twice as many as the A7S III. But I mean, technically there's only 5, because the bin button down the bottom is actually written on it and not actually just the bin logo. The bin logo is still below it, but they've just put in custom button number 4. Now, 3 custom buttons are located directly on the top, pretty much where the shutter button was, and you've got 2 at the back, and then you've got one little sneaky cheeky one down on the front corner right here. Now all of these are fully customizable to pretty much whatever setting you want, and it all really depends on how you shoot and what you actually want to be using them for. Now, on the top of the camera, the record button is I find is in a really, really good position. When you're holding it like this, it is a really good position because naturally my thumb fits exactly where that record button is. Usually on the back there where it says menu, that's kind of a nice position, but on the A7S3, it's in a very slightly awkward position. I've actually put the custom 3 button as my record button on my A7S3. It's just so much more natural for my finger position to be, mainly because of the tilter cage as well. You would have seen in a video a few days ago with the tilter cage. It's a bit of an awkward position, but this is a really, really good position for my thumb. So, you know, kudos for them for putting that there. Now that button also does illuminate as well. So when you do press record, it does have a nice sort of red ring around it, just obviously to show that it is recording. But there's also an LED sort of strip on the backhand side as well that you can notice that it's recording. And then a very, very small LED light on the front hand side. If you are recording from the front, you can actually see that it's recording as well. Now the button that I did find at the top that I wasn't really using at all is this little control nipple wheel thing that you usually find on the back on the A7 III or A7S3. It's usually on the back here, and I actually don't really use it too much, especially when it comes to video. It can actually be handy if you do use the flexible focus point, but I don't use the flexible focus point. I actually preferred to use touch to focus, especially if I do want to, you know, really focus in on one specific area, but I do pair it with manual focusing as well. So on my A7S III, I've got a manual focus button. I did actually customize a manual focus button where it says focus magnifier. I use that as manual to autofocus. So press that, go into manual focus and start manual focusing. I do like to manual focus a lot. I mean, yes, the A7S III and the FX3's focusing is just incredible. Object tracking is pretty decent, and you know, using that nipple just didn't suit my style of shooting. Now I feel a very welcome feature in this is actually the zoom toggle. Now a lot of the cinema cameras will actually have a power zoom function, especially if you do pair it with a power zoom lens, which I personally don't own any power zoom lenses, except for the kit lens, the 16-50 on the APS-C range. That's a power zoom lens. You can actually use that, and it is a really good feature. Obviously, if you want to press it really fast, you hold it. If you want to really dial it in slowly, you just push it really slowly or pull it really slowly. It's actually quite decent, especially when it comes to documentary filmmakers or filmmakers, you know, just run and gun, really on the go. That is a really good feature, but you can also customize it for your clear image zoom as well, which I did end up using because I was shooting with the 24mm anamorphic lens on this, and it's an APS-C lens on here. I used clear image zoom to about 1.4, and it worked very well. It was really good. If I did want to punch in just a touch more, 1.5, you know, I could as well. Now also at the top, they did actually decide to keep the aperture controller on the front, but the rear is interesting. I actually welcome this because the shutter speed isn't something that I actually change very often when I'm actually filming. It's obviously I use ND filters when it comes to changing my exposure outdoors. So the shutter wheel wasn't exactly the best for me in my personal shooting. Now they've changed to ISO, which I really like because you know, ISO is probably one thing that will be adjusting, especially if you are in the low light situations. ISO and aperture are the ones that usually change. Shutter speed usually stays pretty much 180 degrees and stays the same. So just makes a lot more sense to have the ISO there. But you know, instead of tapping that right hand thing on the control wheel and then toggling it around and changing it like that, I just feel it's a little bit better when it comes to filmmaking. Now it is very clear that they did remove the dials at the top as well, because to give it, you know, that nice sort of square shape. And the dials, you know, it was kind of like a photography based thing. It really depends on the person who's actually using it. I didn't use it too much when it comes to the dials, but the mode button where you want to change, you know, all your camera modes or shooting modes is actually on the back, which is just a button and then you scroll through it. So it's, I guess, each to their own. It all really depends on how you actually shoot, but I don't actually mind it being on the back. Now it is next to the on and off switch. Now this one is obviously a switch. It's just like your cinema cameras. Most cameras will have a little switch rather than, you know, the toggle thing on the front that Alpha cameras have. Now the biggest addition to this camera, and is probably why some people might actually get this over the A7S III, is the inbuilt fan. Now that's obviously why this thing is much thicker. Well, it's not much thicker, it is a little bit thicker, but there is an inbuilt fan in here. So it does have really nice active cooling, which will reassure you when you're filming in super hot days and long form content. Now I did overheat this camera. Bear with me. It did overheat, yes, but I forgot to place it into the high temp setting mode. Now I was filming some fitness videos, so it was getting pretty steamy, pretty hot in the studio. It was Australian summer, so it was crazy hot, and it did shut off on me. And I was like, what the hell, there's a fan in here, it shouldn't shut off. And I thought, crap, I need to put it in the high temp mode, just so it won't shut off. Once I put it in the high temp mode, didn't even come up at all, wasn't overheating at all. So, you know, the fan is a really good addition to that, especially when you're, you know, in 40-degree heats over here in Australia. It was crazy hot, especially with my hands being on it the whole time. It does get hot, but there is two vents on here. You've got the vent on the side, which you do feel the fan, and then you've got a vent at the bottom as well, which, you know, is really, really good, especially, you know, if you do have the screen away from the body, that will dissipate heat as well through the body. Now, having the vents on the side and on the bottom, you know, leads me to think this is the big difference between the A7S III and the FX3 is weather sealing. Now, this obviously isn't weather sealed because there's a fan, and if water gets in there or sand gets in there, you're gonna have a whole lot of trouble. So the A7S III is weather sealed. That is probably one of the biggest difference there. So if you do go into a lot of, you know, harsh weather conditions, I would bet against it, but a lot of cinema cameras do obviously have inbuilt fans. So this is standard for cinema cameras. They, you know, most of them aren't weather sealed. So if you are a cinema camera user, you should be used to this anyway. Now, other than these things, it isn't really much different to the A7S III. Like, you get the brand new A7S III menu, which is absolutely fantastic. You get the same frame rates of 4K 120. You get the IBIS with active stability, and also the gyro post stabilization, which is still really, really good. You have the ability to record external RAW at 16-bit through the Animus recorder, so that's still standard. You get the time codes, you get proxy recording, you clear image zoom, and, you know, tons more. But there is one big feature that I know a lot of people want in the A7S III, and that is s-cinetone. Now, s-cinetone, if you don't know, is pretty much the color science straight from the Sony Venice camera. A lot of people love it. It gives them much more sort of warmer tones, and straight out of the camera, it looks, you know, it looks great. You don't have to do much grading, but I guess some filmmakers might not actually like this. They, you know, want to shoot an S-Log and they want to grade it themselves to their own sort of style. So s-cinetone might not actually be for you anyway. But this leads me to think, like, the A7S III, all it needs is just a firmware update. This is exactly the same as the A7S III, and it has s-cinetone. Why doesn't the A7S III have s-cinetone? It's definitely not a processor thing. It's pretty much exactly the same. Sony has just put this limitation in place for the A7S III users, which personally, you know, I don't mind. I don't use s-cinetone. I like to do my own grading, and I guess some other filmmakers would love to do the same as well. But, you know, you still can shoot S-Log 3 in this and then put the color setting to s-cinetone colors, which, you know, can give you some slightly different results. So it all really depends on what kind of grading skills you have, and obviously how you grade your footage. So one big feature I mentioned before that a lot of filmmakers and documentary filmmakers might actually like, and that's the XLR inputs on the handle. Now, that is one thing with the A7S III, is it doesn't have, well, it doesn't come with this handle. You can actually buy the proprietary one through Sony. It is pretty expensive, but this one comes with it, which is great. You do have shotgun sort of mounting point right here, which is also cool. But adjusting audio on the fly is very, very good. So it's very similar to the FX6 and FX9 series when it comes to adjusting the audio, you know, the gain levels, rather than diving into the settings and doing it that way. You can also record directly into two channels. So there's two XLR inputs. You can record both simultaneously, which is, you know, really handy if you do have a shotgun mic and if you do have an over-the-top boom mic as well. And it also does have a 3.5mm audio jack on here as well, which there's one on the body. I don't know why you would actually do that, but you know, it's there. I'd rather sort of have that option than to need it and not have it, so. Now, one of the things as well, in terms of being a cinema camera, this thing shoots 12 megapixel images. So it actually still does shoot photos, just like the A7S III. And yeah, a lot of cinema cameras don't shoot stills. So this is actually a plus for a cinema camera. No, it doesn't have inbuilt ND filters like the FX6 and FX9. But as long as you have variable ND filters on the front of your lens, it's still perfectly fine anyway. But you know, that's still a cool feature to have. If you're tossing up between this and the A7S III, oh, that's a tough choice because A7S III has slight benefits like having the EVF. It also has weather sealing. So, you know, if these two are very crucial for you, it might actually be for you. This might actually be for you. It really depends. I'm a very big run and gun shooter. Weather sealing, yeah, it really isn't a major issue for me. But, you know, if you are shooting in waterfalls or sands, just really crappy, harsh conditions, your camera won't die, which is interesting. But having an EVF can actually be great as well if you're checking exposure. But most professionals use a external monitor anyway. I mean, when I do a lot of video shoots, I tend to use an external monitor. I barely use the EVF, only if I have a really small run and gun situation. EVF can be great just for checking footage. But overall, what do you guys think? Who do you think this is for? Will you actually be canceling your A7S III order and ordering the FX3 instead? But anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button. That would be absolutely amazing. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you already haven't. And yeah, I hope that's satisfied your needs into seeing what this camera is all about. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.